Hello everyone, welcome to another Dragon Legion Reads stream. Today we shall read Mind's Eye Theater Laws of the Night, write up by Rock'n'Rolla Ayatollah. This is our first LARP book, which is, well, in a way a bit interesting, but we will get over that soon. And also a World of Darkness book for their LARP system called Mind's Eye Theater. And yes, a bit of a context for the context of the book. Contents, not context. You see, World of Darkness games ever much since the beginning were pretty heavily gearing towards being available to anyone who would be interested in live action roleplay. Mostly because, well, obviously, since World of Darkness leans very heavily into the urban fantasy type of setting, it's not really hard for people to just dress up in like leather or skirt or something comfortable, go out in the city and just pretend that they are vampires or werewolves or mages or anything like that. It's something that is just much easier to do than any other type of LARPing. And to accommodate that, White Wolf, who was the initial publisher of World of Darkness stuff at that time, came out with the idea of creating a specified LARP book that would be available to the player base. And that book still exists in different shapes of form in the community. But to all of the European LARPers who don't really know about Mind's Eye Theater, and here I want to say, hey Soren, this is not anything that would probably be something for the LARP community in Europe that they would see and take as something they know. Because the LARP scene in the States, and also which the book was primarily targeted towards, is just a bit different, and hopefully the write-up will go into the details, even though it's not really long, as it's one of the abandoned write-ups, but it has at least 4 chapters. And we shall go into it with the introduction chapter. You are not making fun of me, you are making fun of my LARP character. Though it comes up from time to time, no one has really gone into depth about the old Mind's Eye Theater system of LARP books for White Wolf's game lines. This system was used for the over decade until the new By Night Studios book came out, and it being replaced by a much better system. There was a book or books put out for each of their game lines except Demon, and they were all still played up until recently. Those games, though, were hilariously bad in many regards, but have their diehard fans. For this review of the Mind's Eye Theater, Laws of the Night book, I'm going to start with a breakdown of LARPing and the organizations involved in it. What is LARP? LARP is live action role playing, and it's generally any game where you stand around and act out what your character is doing within reason. In the Mind's Eye Theater games, or MET for short, there are strict no touching rules, and everything is resolved through challenges, which we will get to in the general rules breakdown. Since most White Wolf games take place in the modern world, you don't have to dress up like you do for the medieval LARPs. Personally, I also think that a 500-year-old vampire would just dress up like a normal person, because if you walk around looking like Dracula or a foppish Ayn Rand character, even people in the grim world of darkness are going to raise some eyebrows and you wouldn't have lasted 500 years. Why LARP? I think the big question is why you would do something this nerdy and embarrassing when you could just play tabletop in anonymity. The answer for Matt is that the dynamic of the game is completely different from those in tabletop. Instead of the structure of the city or local supernatural organization being made up of NPCs, it's usually made up of player characters. So in Vampire, the prince or the sheriff would be a player character, and that creates a whole new political dynamic to the game that isn't present in tabletop. There's also less of a group dynamic, and it's easier play a backstabbing asshole since you don't have to worry about alienating a friend at the table. How are these organized? There are two types of organizations, troop and national clubs. Troop is usually that your game is a standalone game, though there might be plot lines that reach outside the city. Most stuff outside the city are done with NPCs. This can be good for a number of reasons, which we'll touch on with the clubs, but limits things to a degree. When I started, I played in a local troop game that was most of the younger regulars at my friendly local game store, and it was a good game. Not many problems with people, no creepy people, and just an all-around good time. This is dependent on the group though, and it can very easily be the opposite of this. National club games are run within a usually national or international organization. The biggest and longest running one is the Mind's Eye Society, which used to be called the Camarilla. The Camarilla was founded in 1992 and eventually got taken over by White Wolf after a legal fiasco. The organization tried to sue White Wolf over the copyright of their own properties and got taken over for their delusional behavior. This should give you a good idea at the level the people are running the organization are at. In 2010, White Wolf dropped the organization and now they are independently run. There are similar organizations out there like One World of by Night, which is pretty similar to the Camarilla in terms of you get good and bad. So why play with these guys? You would mostly play in one of these games because it offers at least a nationally connected game. If you want to travel to a nearby city and play in their game for one weekend, you can. If you have problems with a character from out of town, you can talk with the leadership of the city and get things done. There is international interaction between people and there are big con games. In theory, this is pretty cool, but in practice, it's a headache. The Camarilla itself is an organization that has a paid membership system. When I played, it was $20 a year and membership is restricted to 18 and up. The organization, though, never checked ID and I joined the organization when I was 16, no questions asked. Once you are a member, you start out at membership level 1. This could go all the way up to 15 though, it was rare. Your membership level gave you more starting experience points. You could raise this level by running games and doing community service, but people often cheated at the latter. This will become important when we get into specifically why Loves of the Night is a garbage system for Vampire. There was also an approval system that offered checks on character and went up to the international or top part. Within the Camarilla Chronicle, some character types are restricted. In theory, this is done so you don't have a million rare character types running around. So if you want to play your purple-eyed, white-haired Salubri who is one step away from Golconda, you have to get multiple top approvals to play it. This means you have to get approval from your storyteller, your character storyteller, your region storyteller, your national storyteller, and the head of the organization, because there are only a very limited of Salubri in stock. Vampire the Masquerade and Golconda is pretty much close to impossible. The Camarilla is all about who you know though, so if you are friends with the national level storyteller and everyone in between, you are good on your Bali Vampire with Thaumaturgy or your La Sombra anti-tribu. There were people as well who would constantly flaunt this and should have been allowed to play some of the things that were running around. One of the problems with organizations like the Camarilla is that anyone can play and you kind of have to let them. Like the RPGA or Pathfinder Society, which are a fun communities for both D&D and Pathfinder. This attracts the people who can't get a regular game group because they are social pariahs and usually for good reasons. People in the Camarilla also took things way too seriously. The amount of real life vendettas that evolved from in-game lights or actions done by characters was insane. Chapters usually end up destroying themselves sooner or later. There are rules that are made to prevent griefing, but people get around them very easily. Someone killed your character? Tell your friend who lives in Minneapolis with a member class of 12 and an elder vampire he's been playing for 5 years. The person who wronged you will soon get dealt with, and it's perfectly okay because that elder has a perfectly good reason for what he did. Technically, storytellers are allowed to disallow people from bringing their game-breaking characters to games or sending them in proxy, but in practice, it never happens for those reasons. Those people who might be connected will complain, you might get audited, your characters might get killed off, and you might have future approvals denied for reasons. This didn't happen as much for proxies, but when someone drives 2 hours to your game, you can't really turn them away without feeling like an asshole. It's all very petty and childish, but then again, this is an organization that sued the maker of the game. They play for the intellectual property rights to it. Up next, the basic rules of the original MET system. And yes, as you could have seen, there is a lot of drama involved in the LARP community, and it is very important to learn how to play with people, because you never know. You never well them know. Next chapter, basic MET rules, the economics of inequality. The rules that the Mind's Eye Theater system uses aren't the best, truth be told, and all the games use it. For some, like Werewolf, it's not that bad, but for Vampire, it's really bad. The system works on a system of traits that are capped at a certain numbers based on your power level. For mortals, the cap on traits is 10, abilities is 5 for most, and magical powers are capped by power level. Traits are in characteristics of your character. They are divided into physical, mental, and social traits. In most games, these are represented by a numbered value, but in MET, they are actual traits. You can be dexterous, agile, brawny, or knowledgeable, for instance. When challenges are attempted, you have to bid an appropriate trait and make a test. This test is handled with throwing rock, paper, scissors. Once the test is resolved, you either succeed or fail. Ties go down to the number of traits you have. This is important, so keep this in mind for later. If you fail, you can get a retest by spending an ability point or from a supernatural power. Abilities are generally the same as in tabletop, but give you a retest. Traits are temporarily lost on a failure, and once abilities are used, they are temporarily gone. Traits in a single category can be refreshed by spending a willpower trait, but you can only do that once per session. So unlike in tabletop, you can't go on forever. If you have double the number of traits than your opponent, you can retest a challenge because you are that much more powerful than them. It goes without saying that using rock, paper, scissors is stupid because it's as much a game of skill as it is chance. It's also really easy to cheat at rock, paper, scissors. If you know how the person you are throwing against thinks, you can beat them. I know that this is not very easy, but some people really do get into Bart Simpson mode and think nothing beats rock. This can also be modified if you have potence, which can give you the bomb. The bomb is a thumbs up that can only be beaten by scissors. Only vampires, to my knowledge, can gain access to this mechanic. In tabletop, there's an element of random chance and dice can explode. A Neonite vampire still has a chance against an older vampire, but in Met, that's not the case. Since there is no real chance mechanic and because dice aren't being used, it's just a static number and the lack of the draw in rock, paper, scissors. Since traits are tied to your level of supernatural power, you are screwed as a lower power character going up against a higher powered one. In Werewolf, for instance, this is okay because werewolves can go up in rank and climb the ladder of spiritual power. The same is true for most other supernaturals. This is not true for vampires in Masquerade. Vampires have a mechanic called generations which represents their connection to Cain, the original vampire. Cain's children were the second generation, their children were the clan founders, and this goes all the way up to the 13th generation. There are 14th and 15th generation vampires, but they are barely vampires and are a sign of a nearing apocalypse. Vampires have blood traits. Normal humans have 10 blood points, and as vampires go down in generation, the blood becomes more potent. The number doesn't represent the total amount of blood the person has, but its relative power and how much it satiates a vampire's hunger. The number on the left is the total number of blood points, and the ones on the right is the amount that can be spent a round. Disciplines usually use blood points, so it limits the number of disciplines you can use a round. The path of blood thaumaturgy path can temporarily lower the caster generation, but the only way to do this is permanently is at character creation or through diablerie. Diablerie is an act by which a vampire devours the soul of another vampire. If the vampire being diablerized is lower generation, the offender's generation will be lowered by one step and they might gain a free discipline. They also gain 2 free experience points between them. They also gain 2 free experience points because they have to make this crime more worthwhile. Diablerie is a crime universally punished by destruction and can be detected by reading a vampire's aura with Auspex. In an organization like the Camarilla, you would have players constantly rolling in with at least 8th generation characters with 50 plus XP at character creation because they had high member class. A person who just started playing character by default can't even think about stepping up to that level. The theory was that this would cause there to be a greater variety of gameplay, but in reality it just made an old boys club where the same people were always at the top regardless of how they played. Which then shows at this point that a big problem in the Vampire LARP was the fact that people would just abuse the rules to play as harder to beat characters, while other games didn't had that type of power-ups and traits to help in getting to that level. They were much more narrative based. And now we shall go into the next part. Part 1. What faction should this game be based around? The correct answer is Camarilla. Always Camarilla. For this section, we are going to talk about the factions you can run a chronicle around. There is a book for the Camarilla, Sabbath, and Anarchs, but they aren't really needed to tell the truth. The first two have some bloodlines, disciplines, thaumaturgy paths, and the Anarch book has some combo disciplines, but this all extra. With the Sabbath guide, you get into all the rare and somewhat powerful bloodlines of the Sabbath, but they are not really good for PCs. Yeah, you could play Kiasid, but you will probably never come out of your reading room And to be honest, if you want to read, just read because it will be more rewarding than most LARPs. Vampire or Khainite History 101. As mentioned before, Khaine was the first vampire. There's a good deal of stuff in the World of Darkness prehistory that is up for debate, but Khaine is 100 the progenitor of all vampires. Khaine, cursed by God for the murder of his brother, uses his curse to embrace the second generation so that he could have a family. Those children embrace the founders of the Dark Ages and modern clans. This period of time is shrouded in a good deal of ambiguous mystery, and what became of many of these figures is of heated debate. While into Dark Ages vampire, some of the third generation are still around and active. Most of the third generation set up shop in specific geographic areas and began having children on their own. The fourth generations, Methuselah, are incredibly powerful, detached from their humanity and known for their capricious natures. An example of this is Mithras, who I posted in the Earth thread. He claims to be the Mithras, a bunch of other supernaturals do though, so no big deal, and he was the leader of London until the Blitz knocked him into torpor. Before the time of the Reformation, vampires often did not hide their true natures and lorded over humanity. This is of course dangerous, but mortals be damned, time to be an undead king, queen, with all the swagger that comes from being a godlike baller or boss bitch. Humanity though is beginning to regroup. The social orders of Europe is changing as well. The Catholic Church is losing influence over everyday life and the Order of Reason is beginning to be formed. They are the progenitors of the technocracy, but oddly enough, they are not the catalyst of what happens next. With the founding of the Inquisition, the Catholic Church is beginning to find evidence of vampires and other supernatural creatures. The Catholic Church deals with them like they deal with most issues relating to the heretical, eliminating them with extreme prejudice. Elders, realizing that the jig is up, begin throwing their children at the Inquisition, hoping that the Inquisition will think that they have killed the evil vampire lord they are after. The children, though, don't like this and the Anarch Revolt begins. The Anarch Revolt are like the vampire version of the Wars of Religion and the English Civil War. The Bruja initially lead this revolt, but it spreads to other clans. Upstart from the Tremere moved to capitalize on the situation. The Giovanni usurped the clan status of their Cappadocian master. The Asimite get involved. De la Sombra and Zimis diablerize their founders, and the chaos of the time leads to great upheaval for everyone. The hostilities are ended by the Convention of Thorns. The Camarilla is founded to act as a vampire Illuminati to ensure that what just happened never happens again. The Sabbat is formed by De La Sombra and Zimis, who don't want to join the Camarilla, and some less hardcore vampires keep fighting for the Anarchos, though they are usually considered members of the Camarilla. The Tremere enforce the peace on the Assamites by cursing them and earn themselves a place in the Camarilla. The independent clans remain independent because they are dirty necrophilic mobster necromancers, gypsy stereotypes, and canon villains. Factions. The Camarilla is the standard for a vampire game. Laws of the Night pretty much assumes that this is the faction that you will be going with. They have all the standard clans, they are pretty average vampires, and they have the most stable structure. Camarilla domains are ruled by a prince, and they usually answer to the inner circle, though this is rare. A prince is served by his seneschal, sheriff, whip, occasionally scourge, and maintain a primogeniture council composed of clan representatives. All of these positions should normally be maintained by player characters, but that might require more players than you have. Each of these positions carries different status traits that show your character's political power. Someone who has more traits is generally considered to be more powerful than another character. Camarilla society also operates on the exchange of boons, favors redeemable for help or aid when asked for it. All in all, it lends itself to less conflict than the other factions. The Sabbath originally began in first edition as boogeyman, shadowy urban legend told to frighten neonites. In second edition, they evolved into gangs of serial killers, and in revised, they evolved into serial killer survivalists. The Sabbath believe that they are the true heirs of Cain and that the antediluvians, the third generation, should be killed because they wronged Cain. The Sabbath operate in packs and practice the Volderi, a ritual where they bleed into bowl as a group and drink from it. These bonds leave them together as a pack and prevents them from being bloodbound. They do have a lower level blood bond to the pack as a whole, but they won't be committed to a single master. A pack is led by a ductus, and there are positions such as the priest manages the rites and the abbot who manages their communal heaven. Sabbath domains are administered by a bishop who answers to the archbishop and who in turn answers to a cardinal. Under the cardinals are a priesthood council who works as a board of regents like the primogen. There are positions in between, but I won't go into them because they are not as important. The Sabbath have many rituals, some festivals and games that they play that are set up like slasher horror movies. Sabbath games are problematic because they attract people who like playing chaotic, stupid characters. The Sabbath is also an antagonist faction, so they tend to be more broken than the Camarilla and Anarchs. Among the packs, they share disciplines, even in clan disciplines like Obtendebration and Vicissitude, and since they work as a group, they are stronger than individual vampires. The Sabbath also has Assemites and pretty much every bloodline you can think of other than Tremere anti-tribu. They were wiped out of balance, and because of that, they are a beacon for power gamers. Due to the organization of the Sabbath, you also need a good number of players for an All Sabbath Chronicle. Edit Adenum Sabbath factions. The Sabbath has several factions. The Black Hand are the stormtroopers of the Sabbath. They are usually ideologically dedicated to the Hand and the Sabbath as a whole. They are loosely related to the True Hand of Dirty Secrets of the Black Hand and are much more organized than the Sabbath as a whole. They usually do assassinations and commando raids on the Camarilla and have special moon tattoos on their hands. The Sabbath Inquisition are set up to root out infernalism within the Sabbath. The Sabbath might be made up of monsters, but they are not infernalists. I guess even a sect that recruits people by hitting them over the head with a shovel, embracing them and burying them has to have some standards. The Anarchs are the Washington Generals to the Harlem Globetrotters of everyone else. They once controlled California, but got their collective shit kicked in by the incrustable celestials known as the Quajin. Whoever came up with that name deserves to be publicly shamed. Anarchs don't really follow a set make-up, though there are usually barons who are like warlords, and the domains tend to be made up of gangs. Anarch gangs are usually not as well organized or devoted as their Sabbath counterparts. This is mostly because the Volderi make Sabbath vampires into cult fanatics. There are positions under Baron and among gangs, but to be honest, they don't really matter. Anarch vampires tend to be neonites as well, and most leave by the time they reach higher status. It's essentially like being that 30-plus-year-old guy at the punk show getting mad at people for being rowdy and then leaving after some kid gives you shit for a stupid reason. The Anarchs have combination disciplines called devotions, and though they are cool, they are prohibitively expensive, and you are going to get decapitated by a shadow tentacle wielding a parking meter before you can reach optimum efficiency. Also, you have to find someone who knows the devotion to teach you, so good luck with that. Part 2. Rich Vampire Dad, Poor Vampire Dad. Let's talk about experience costs. Some would probably think we should talk about the clans since we talked about the different sects last update. We will cover the XP cost because it will get into the cost of disciplines and why some clans are just better than others. The Mad games have a very similar setup compared to their tabletop counterparts, but a bit simpler. Generally, a player is going to be getting about 5 XP a month, and that's usually after playing one of two games a month. If you play in the Camarilla or Mindsight Society, you can see how member class MC is a big deal. Someone who is established within the organization can usually start up a character with almost a year's worth of experience and is accruing experience at the same rate as all other players. XP costs are as follows. Most things in game outside of out of disciplines are usually most things in game outside of out of clan disciplines are usually affordable with a month's worth of experience. As you can see, abilities and traits are 1 points each. Usually people max this out at character creation with flaws. You are normally allowed 7 points of flaws in most games. You usually have enough willpower at character creation and don't need to buy more after the fact, but can. Humanity is usually fine as well, unless you are a screw up or you are converting to a path other than humanity, which you have to buy up. Disciplines are a big point sink, especially ones like Thaumaturgy or Necromancy, but Thaumaturgy is so broken at times that it doesn't even matter. Out of clan disciplines are disciplines not part of your clan disciplines list and are more expensive. You usually have to get someone to teach you these disciplines, and if it's a special in-clan discipline, they probably won't teach you it unless you cash in a big boon. For instance, to learn Quietus outside of the Asemite clan, they have to mess up on a hit that you put out, which is rare. Displaying use of a clan specific discipline can also get you into trouble with that clan if you don't have a good reason for knowing it. For example, displaying Thaumaturgy when you are from a clan other than Tremere is a good way to get yourself reduced to ash. The Tremere don't teach Thaumaturgy outside of the clan, and they are so organized that they know all the people who would be allowed to learn it. You would also be screwed if you get it from Diablerie because it requires teachers and an occult library specializing in Thaumaturgy to learn it. We'll get into the particulars of Thaumaturgy and Necromancy once we talk about disciplines, but if you are familiar with tabletop, it works about the same way. The most important factor at character creation, as you can see, is your clan. For these reasons, you get some questionable character concept because the player is working from the power set as a concept instead of the clan as a concept. The biggest offenders in this regard are usually Tremere players who play characters who would not have been embraced by the clan. You could argue that with a great backstory anything is possible. You are wrong by that. But the Tremere are the Google of vampire clans and they are very particular with who they choose. They have a strict clan code they have to follow, a pyramid-like structure with ranks and even telepathic conferences. They are probably not going to embrace a pyromaniac whose only ambition and knowledge is setting things on fire. And that was all that was in this write-up. And from it all, we most likely can see that the LARP in itself had a lot of really nice things to offer, like being able to play a vampire and backstab people, play political games, and all of that. But as per usual, the fact that it requires talking with people and being social and just trying to not be an ass about stuff, and by that getting kicked out of the game or by abusing rules or anything in that vein, It proves that playing a social game is really just hard because everyone wants to be the best, but no one wants to start from the bottom when there is a possibility of starting from a higher place. We have also not really seen that much of the rule set, which, well, we only have one person to blame, and that person is the author of this write-up. But well, uh, as all of the others abandoned text, it can only serve as an appetizer for the real thing, as getting one's hands on the laws of the night is not that hard. And yeah, I would say that this has been an interesting peek into the world of the Vampire the Masquerade LARPers. I hope that I won't really have to get into any of that drama anytime soon. And to all of you listeners, I can only ask you to stay tuned, for there will be much more things to come. Good night.